Welcome to the Indie Author Spotlight, where we interview indie authors about upcoming releases as well as life as an author, presented to you by Books, Brews, and Dogs. You can visit booksbrewsanddogs.com, purchase a blind date with a book, and support animal rescue efforts. Books, Brews, and Dogs is where you can buy a book and save a dog or a cat.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Books, Brews, Dogs Indie Author Spotlight podcast. And I am here with author Amy Vogel. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yay. Um, and we're going to be discussing her projects, what she's got going on, and her book, Teleosis, which is the book that I was able to read prior to and found very interesting. And I'm super excited to finally get to sit down face to face with you and talk about some stuff. So how are you doing today? What's going on?
I'm good. I'm good. So it's warm where I am, so I'm not complaining. I'm doing really well, and I love podcast interviews. They're just fun conversations to have.
Yeah, it's been one of the highlights of with all the craziness that is happening right now with moving across the country and having to, go back and forth to storage unit and everything. One of the highlights of my time is getting to do these interviews and meet you guys and talk to you guys. So it's very exciting. Um, for me, I'm like sometimes I think I might be overly enthusiastic about it right now.
I appreciate it. You gotta love your passion.
Yeah. So, the book that I read prior to this interview, Teleosis, that's one of your earlier projects that you had.
Yeah, it was my first fiction debut. It was my first fiction debut. It was my fiction debut. I had two nonfiction books published prior to this, but this one was the first fiction. I just did it on a whim, like I
Yeah.
tend
And
to do everything.
it's an it's an interesting fiction because it's almost like a contemporary fantasy.
Yeah.
So it takes place in the real world, but it is a fictional religion um, mixed in with societal views, but you do still talk about real places like the United States and Europe and, you know,
Yep.
as they are. And so it's this interesting meld of real versus imagined. And right before we hit record on this, there we made that point of when I was reading the book, I saw a lot of political aspects in it. And that could be a lot with everything that's going on in our world and within the US specific. There's a lot of similarities there, but you found it interesting that I took that because you wrote it with a more religious aspect. And so tell us about the intention of the religion that was created because you have a religion that basically ended up being dissolved, but they were
Mhm.
also their own community. So
Right.
tell us a little bit more about that and what inspired that.
Yeah, yeah. So the idea behind teleosis was it was the alternative to essentially Christian fundamentalism. And I didn't grow out of I wasn't raised in Christian fundamentalism, but I think everyone, especially in the Western world, has been influenced to a certain degree by
Mhm.
these very fundamental beliefs. I mean, I still struggled with purity culture, even though I was in still a very moderate denomination. For me, teleosis was an opportunity, and the faith practices, the civilization of teleosis practiced a um, they called it the fourfold God. So father, mother, son, daughter. So versus the Trinity in Christianity. And the background to this, where it starts, is there was a break way back in the creation narrative that the idea that quote unquote sin entered the world not through Eve's disobedience and eating and offering the apple or pomegranate or whatever it was. Like I could dive that all day long because I've spent so long studying it, but that wasn't the moment that humanity broke with the divine. The in teleosis in that civilization, the moment that the relationship with the divine happened was when Cain killed Abel. So when violence entered the world. So
Mhm.
it wasn't the sin of the woman, it was the sin of the older brother killing his brother, killing his flesh and blood. And it took off from there. So you bring up the um essentially the genre. It is a mix of urban fantasy and women's fiction. So it
Mhm.
is set in real time in our world, in our day, our time, to the 2020s, if you will. Um, but um, it is representative of my journey to try and find a faith when I was exiting out of the faith that I'd had, the religion I'd been a part of my whole life, Christianity, and I was in ministry, and I was deep on the side of how the sausage was made, if you will. And when that imploded, I had to find something. I'm a very spiritual person by nature, and so it wasn't an option for me to not have some kind of faith. So I wrote Teleosis to write myself out of the world I was living in, which was a lot of chaos in my life at that time. But also to give me something that would like almost restore my faith in humanity, give me a vision. And so for me, having been in the church for so long, I mean, I have called myself and still am a Bible nerd, whether or not I'm a Christian. And I don't claim that faith anymore, but still a Bible nerd. That time period, everything having to do with that, um, I wanted to explore something beyond. And it's funny because I've had so many readers say, I've always had questions. I've always had questions. And the most interesting part about that is every single book I write starts with a question. And the question for Teleosis was, what if it wasn't Eve? What if that quote unquote, that moment in that creation narrative wasn't the breaking point? And so I got to explore that through Anira's story. And I had read a lot of books, including a book called When God Was a Woman. And so it tells that book is a nonfiction book and tells the story of the matriarchal religions that existed in the cradle of civilization before patriarchy came on the scene, specifically in Crete. Crete was the last um, matriarchal religion. And so that's why the civilization of Teleosis was actually anchored out off the coast of Greece. I didn't
Yeah.
come right out and say Greece. I didn't come out and say Crete, but that was the inspiration behind all of that. And I was really just trying to write my way out of a whole lot of confusion and into something that could bring some peace to my soul.
Well, that's something that I hear from a lot of authors is a lot of their books at times were written um, to kind of help them get through. It's almost like journaling through fiction
Yeah,
instead of what's actually happening, but creating
yeah.
these different scenarios. And it, in a lot of ways, it's the same way we pick up a book and we read a book. When we
Yep.
fall in love with those characters and we connect with them, it's because we see kind of what they're going through and how they're handling it. And we're able to gain perspective or work through something in a more safe manner
Hmm.
emotionally uh,
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
reading or
that
writing.
was my lived experience. Absolutely. I mean, when my church that I was a pastor for ended, I just sat down, and fiction has always been my first love, but I hadn't read a whole lot of it because I was doing all these Bible studies and preaching and all. So I returned back to fiction, and I think ACOTAR was one of the very first books that I picked up because it was all the rage. And then I read 76 more books that year, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try my hand at this. I need something, but Teleosis isn't very spicy. It's not like Akotar.
Yeah.
My books since then definitely have a lot more spice, but that was also part of my journey, writing myself out of that residual purity culture and into self-love and self-embodiment and self-pleasure and all of that. So Teleosis was like you said, I got to in a safe way process my trauma which is why the subtitle is a novel of trauma and transformation. Um, and process my trauma so that it became a very popular word in the New Age spiritual world is alchemized into transformation. So I got to do that through that book. And it's so funny because, yes, it's urban fantasy, but it also works for women's fiction, which is all about transformational main character journeys. So
Yep.
I've had a devil of a time marketing it. Because it does, and you brought up too, like the way that you read it, the perspective and light which you read it was different than the way I wrote it because I was kind of confused when you said it was kind of political, and I was like, really? And then I was like, oh yeah, because a woman is in front, so
Yeah.
it's inherently political.
For me, I didn't even register it as political because she was a main character and in those positions of power so much as it was the fight between that patriarchal and the
Mhm.
matriarchal.
Yeah,
And we're kind of dealing with that currently where,
yeah,
you know, there's it, people within patriarchy are fighting to the death against anybody who is showing compassion.
yeah,
And and you kind of see that come out in the book in the way that one religion handled and one viewpoint handled another and basically destroyed a nation. They then had to kind of disperse and move around, and then they ended up um I don't want to give too much away, but they end up confronting each other, and there's a lot of inner, how do we get around this? How do we make this work? And
yeah,
self-realizations on both sides of different aspects. And so, but I noticed that to me it felt like there was a lot of parallels to what is happening now. And I think that part of that is because more so than ever, Christianity is coming into the political system within the United States.
absolutely.
And it never really, I mean, it's kind of always been there, but it's been a lot more in the background through our lifetime than it is now. Like how much forward it's being pushed.
Yeah.
And I also come from a religious background. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I no longer practice that faith. So I understand and I see the traumas that can happen and the trauma bond that comes from that type of belief system that
Yeah.
is extremely stringent and strict and unyielding.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting though that I also came from that kind of strict religious background, but for me, I saw the politics of it more than I
Yeah.
saw and I understood the religious side of it and everything, but that may also be, I kind of always resisted it, even as a
Yeah.
kid. I was the bane of my parents' existence because I absolutely refused to get baptized.
Mm.
Um, Everyone else in my family is baptized. Everybody went through the processes, and I did all the work, and I went out and I did the ministry and I did all the things, but I never could tie to it because something innate just felt innately wrong. And they're like, well, just baptize. They were always telling me, just get baptized. Don't you want to be able to get married and have a family? And I would just look at them and go, that's not the point of baptism.
Right.
Like I can't get baptized just to have a family. Like that's like it is a to me seeing that baptism was a dedication, and there were things about the faith that I just could not stand behind or get behind. Um Even at a young age, I could not be okay with the idea that God would smite somebody for sitting in the back of a synagogue instead of the back of a kingdom hall.
Right. Yeah.
Like I couldn't fathom that this benevolent, caring God would do that. And so it just everything felt so twisted and wrong um to me. And that's my personal choice, and I don't begrudge anybody their religious decisions or choices, but
Mhm.
it's interesting how much of what happened in the book felt so similar to what is happening now.
Yeah. Yeah, I always have thought, and it's funny because my oldest daughter, who's 22 now, she was 18 when I was writing it, and so she was one of my alpha readers. So she was reading it as I wrote it. And the most interesting part about that to me is that even her religious experience was different, especially, having a mom who was a pastor and having a mom who was a late comer to pastoral ministry. I was in my 40s before I really got involved in it. And so, what you're saying, it reminds me of what she always said, which was that the main character, Anira, she always pictured as me, even though Anira is a woman of color and, definitely didn't write her to be me, but Anira asked so many questions and resisted in ways that when I look back on my own personal journey, I wish I would. I wish I would have done that. So I got to write a character that kind of lived an experience that parts of it I wish I had known. I just went with the flow. I didn't question. And
Yeah.
I say that there were questions. The questions were already there, but my own stuff around people pleasing and stuff just it didn't get it didn't get resolved until I was in my 40s. So, and I find with every character I write, there are pieces of me, whether it's younger version of me or me now or who I want to become, um, those make their way into the stories. And that's why they say every book has a soul, because you're putting part of yourself into the book. So, Anira's questioning and her resistance, even before her civilization is destroyed. And I'll say this to kind of give readers an idea. I say this at every event when people ask me what the book is about. Basically, you've got a last lost heir. She was the heir to be high priestess, and then her civilization got destroyed. And where we find her when the book starts is 20 years later after she rebuilt her life. And a mysterious man comes in and offers to help her rebuild the civilization. And so then everything starts to unpack in terms of his motivations and the life she had built and how unhappy she is. And, it's just, it becomes the story about people with that religious political layers built into it. Not that I did really any of that intentionally. So it
Well,
just kind of came out. I was living it.
in the book, she deals with quite a few uh, personal demons,
Yeah.
both through her, um, not her sexuality, but her feelings towards sex and it being
Mhm.
open and then it not being able to be as open and you know how she grew up viewing it versus how everyone else viewed it and how she had to change because her society and so you see kind of that but then she also with all of the trauma with her civilization dying and everything that had happened she also ends up becoming an alcoholic
Mhm.
and dealing with that trauma and so why so many different because I feel like there was another one in there that I can't think of right now. But there's at least those two major ones that
Yeah.
she dealt with.
Mhm. Well, there's work
Well,
conflict. There's the
and then she
dynamics
also
of,
dealt
yeah.
with a major betrayal. uh,
Yep.
during all of this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
becoming an alcoholic feels kind of reasonable after that.
Right. Right.
But
Well, yeah. Yeah.
what was the inspiration to put in, it was a transformation for you,
Hmm.
transformative and dealing with that. So like what was the reasoning behind those choices? Was it because it was easier for you to write, or because you know of those experiences either firsthand or secularly, or that might be a little personal, sorry.
That's
But
okay.
um
I told you there are no sacred cows, so
it's true. So just like how did you get there? Because those are very difficult things to write, difficult things to broach, and they're not easy. um they're hard things, and a lot of people will hear about that being in a book and then turn that away. So what was
right.
it that made you need or want to put that in uh, your first book?
Yeah. I didn't know what I didn't know, but also I'm a late comer to this calling of writing. It was something I always enjoyed, but I never did. I didn't write stories as a little girl. I mean, I'm sure I did, but it wasn't ever in my mind to be a writer.
Mhm.
As much as I enjoyed expressing myself through the written word, most of that was really contained within the environments I was in. Of course, journaling and all of, personal journaling. But they tell you, especially when you're starting out, and I say they, like the industry standard in publishing, and as a book coach now as well, I often tell my clients, you got to write what you know, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, it has to be authentic. And so if the reader knows that this is not something you know much about, they're going to pick up on that energetically. And it's going to be a point of dissonance. It's like a note that's out of tune. Um, so for me, I am a recovering alcoholic. And so at the time I was writing this book, I actually made Anira's sobriety just a little bit less than my own. So I knew what she was going through in that first year of sobriety.
Mhm.
I knew how I know personally how difficult that is and how you're still operating even in recovery, even if you've had have a drink, you've got all of this mess in your head that you've spent a lifetime trying to push away. And so how that plays out into your decisions, and it certainly does in Anira's life, was something that I also wanted to explore. Um, and that was just fun. That was fun because while I don't have firsthand experience with my, or I didn't at the time, first-hand experience with my life blowing up. It came later, and that's the inspiration for another book, another my romance book. But at the time, I really knew that things get real sticky
Mhm.
when you're in early sobriety. And so some of the other pieces that she deals with, there's a pretty long trigger warning in the beginning of the book. There are some flashback memories to some sexual assault that she experienced, and the I've come to realize that I was writing Teleosis just creatively flowing, and I didn't understand how much it would inform my calling as an author. And so a lot of the things I did for that book, I did subconsciously, unconsciously. I now do them consciously. And so when I say that I write bold books for bold women, I write for women, period. I, great. I mean, I have men who've read my books, but they're not my target audience. And so every book I write is meant to expand and expound on the feminine journey. And so I was doing that with Teleosis. I didn't really realize it at the time, but as a woman and as a woman in my mid 40s, I had to process all of this stuff that I had been through and what my friends had been through and what we collectively as women have been through, and put it somewhere. And so that's a huge, even now, a huge inspiration for this next series that I'm actively writing, and just challenging the idea of what it means to be a whole person, a whole woman,
Yeah.
in the fullness of femininity. And so, Yeah, Anira opened the door for me.
Yeah, she is a very robust character. Um, because and she's very much, a woman um in her 40s,
Yeah,
later in life, in midlife area, because and you feel that, as a woman who's just turned 40 in September. I it's different. It is very different than being 30, and it's weird because, it's only 10 years, but, look at the difference between 20 and 30,
yeah,
right? And you have that same gap between 30 and 40,
yeah,
and you look at things differently and you're seeing things differently. And but it's still really weird because sometimes I look at things and I'm like, and I'll make a decision or I'll do something or I'll be acting and I'm like, am I 20 or am I 40? You know, like
yeah,
why am I?
yeah,
And you kind of you get that feeling and you see that kind of maturity, but also that insecurity of,
yeah,
you know, looking back a day or two later going, oh my God, I let my emotion kind of run that one, right?
right.
Where,
Which you don't know at 20. You're a blank
yeah,
slate at 20 still.
at
And
20,
um,
you're not doing that. You're not
yeah,
realizing it 2 or 3 days after. You're realizing it years after,
right.
months after, years after. But you're seeing this unfold in real time. And so there's a lot of ways as an older, more mature adult that you can really connect with Anira. And
Yeah,
um, when reading the book, I honestly didn't even register she was written as a person of color because you focus so much on the emotional aspects
hmm,
that um, you can really kind of put yourself in that position, which
yeah,
I think is also why your daughter, saw you as the main character.
right.
Had you not, and so it's not, I don't think it's so much against saying you didn't write that part well enough, but you wrote the emotional aspects and the turmoils
Yeah,
well enough that you could disconnect from the look of the character
right.
to connect so thoroughly with the emotional state of the character.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when I say we relate to characters, that's how I relate to characters.
yeah,
Is through, that's how I feel most of us relate to characters, that the look of them doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, I read a lot of fantasy, so I read a lot of books where the main character is half human or half elf, or,
right,
like
right.
they might be half goat.
You
I
just
don't know. I
forget
can't
your
think of
brain. Yeah,
a hobbit, you know.
right. Yeah,
I am
yeah,
clearly not a hobbit, but I can connect with that emotional journey. And at
yeah,
some point, you don't think about them as a hobbit. You think of them as a person going through something, and
right.
you feel through that journey. And so I think, for me at least, that's what happened. And so when you were like, oh, she, and I was like, how did I miss that? But it was really, connecting. And I think, with the journey that she's going through, with the destruction of her civilization, with her coming to terms with her beliefs and how they are changing and adjusting, and the things that were happening within her civilization to what she has now, and still reconciling with betrayals and all of these different things that have gone on. you know you're there's so many emotional things to connect to,
Yeah,
that so much of the rest of the book kind of takes a background. And it feels so much like you wrote it for this timeline. At least it did for me. Um, for where we're at now. Not that you wrote it prior to, because
Right, right.
it's a lot of what's happening. And I think a lot of women or people in general that are going through a lot of this stuff can really understand, because in reality, everything she's going through, men also go through it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But writing it as a perspective of a woman, we don't have as many profound stories in that sense that approach the betrayals and everything in the same way, or at least I've not found as many. Um,
yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I mean,
we get a lot of the heroines going in, but this is all inner work, inner transformations, like you're
yeah,
saying. It's a
yeah.
book of transformation, and so this is more like overcoming yourself than it is going in and overthrowing a tyrannical government, which is,
Right,
usually what we see in fantasies. And so it's
right.
very, um, it was very interesting, and it was very, there's a lot of points where you have to kind of stop and process what just happened or what's going on. Because
Yeah.
there's so much constantly.
Yes, yes, which is also probably why it feels relevant for this timeline, is because there is so much going on constantly. Like it's just been a barrage, and our nervous systems can only take so much. But what I love about fiction, compared to my nonfiction books, is that you can do the most in fiction. Like you really can. You can do the most extreme things. In fact, I've been reading a book as part of improving my craft by Sue Monk Kidd. It's her book on writing creativity. And she talks about how she is constantly asking herself when she is plotting, especially getting towards the end of a book, like, what if? What is the what if? Don't just, her encouragement was don't just write the obvious. Ask the what if question. And you can do that in fiction. And admittedly, sometimes life is stranger than fiction, but for the most part, most people don't live the kind of one thing after another that Anira has lived, because we're also not lost heirs to an ancient civilization. So, but in a way we are. That's the thing. And but we are. Every woman is an heir to what has been lost due to the misandry and the misogyny and the androcratic oppression that we've experienced. So it's just one of those things where we identify so strongly with fantasy, and romantasy is admittedly my favorite genre, um, because it is a reclamation of who we are, what we can do, our purpose, our calling, and our strengths.
And the
And
fact that
so,
we're able to have those things.
yes, yes, even if we have to fight for them, absolutely.
Being told,
Absolutely.
when for so long we've been told that our only purpose is to bring life into the world, and that we have no other reason for
Yeah,
being,
yeah,
other than to serve. And so it's interesting being a very independent person growing up in a place where you're told that you aren't, unless you're obedient, you're not worth,
yeah,
um so you have
yeah,
no worth. And it's absolutely crazy, um the things that are going on,
yeah,
in this moment, and how hard some people are pushing to go backwards, and how little others are pushing to resist that step back.
right.
And so this book was very cathartic in a way for that. Kind of, you know, we can still get through it. We can still have that inner power, that inner strength, even if we are living in a world that we feel we don't belong, because she is definitely living in a world she does not belong in this book.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So
But
it,
yet she finds her, I always have to bring it out. She finds her way back. She
yeah.
finds her way back. Even in the midst of all of it, I mean, she has to go to the bitter end, but she comes back. So it was a lot of fun to write. And you probably remember, I mean, you're talking about things where I have to kind of scrape the dust off of my brain and like, oh yeah, that happened. Because it's been, it's been out in the world for 2 years, but I started writing it in 2021. So it's like, oh yeah. Oh, I see now why I'm writing what I'm writing. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Uh,
So, um, so what other, because we've been talking, we've been here for 45 minutes now. We've only talked about this book. But you have other books. It just shows
yes.
like how interesting this book is. Because we could go on, but I want to cover some of your other works. I want to talk about the other books that you have out, the inspirations behind those, what your writing process looks like.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we can manage all of that, but we'll try.
Fast. It's like a lightning round. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, the other book that I would always encourage people to read, if Teleosis was cathartic for you,
Mhm.
Feminine Rising is the next step for that because it's in the same world. The difference is it happens 2,000 years before Anira lives, and it's a novella. And so, you got 7 chapters to experience what a high priestess actually was like, what she actually did. And there's some spice in there too. Like I got over my purity culture stuff and started writing spice, which is extremely technical, by the way. Um, and then, yeah, so I always encourage if you enjoy Teleosis, you will definitely love Feminine Rising for the feminist aspect of it, and not just for the woman power down with men, but again for that wholeness of femininity, and how they end up defeating empire through a very feminine expression. It's not the Teleosis doesn't go to war against Rome. They do, but they don't do it in the same way Rome does it. So for me, that book was an exploration of how do we actually wield power as women. It's different. It's very, very different. And it may be something that, yeah, we need to explore. And then the next fiction I released after that was a romance, sports romance, and that was a very personal journey for me because again, like I said, or I alluded to it earlier, when I was writing Teleosis, my life hadn't blown up. My life blew up after Teleosis, so I got to write The Assist. Uh, I was reading a lot of romance, I will say that, a lot of romantasy, and I was like, you know what? I want to write something that's fun. I want to write a romance. I want to write a dual POV. I want to write a man that I would like to be in a relationship with, um, and have the still have that essence of a woman who struggles because that's my story too. Like even when you get into a healthy relationship, doesn't mean you like leave all of those negative patterns behind. And so, how can I explore this? And so how can I explore what a love that is holistic looks like between a man and a woman? And so that was a whole lot of fun to write, especially the very technical, spicy scenes, and there are a lot. So it's not erotica, but it's definitely level 4 spice. So if you read Teleosis, just know the assist way spicier.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't see, I don't even remember any of those scenes. Like I know that they happen, but I don't remember them. I remember the emotional scenes where
Yes.
she's sitting down and she's sees the brother of her
Yes.
betrayer.
Yes.
Um, and I remember, and the emotions that she felt going through that, and then
Yeah.
the emotions when they had to have more intimate conversations and the things like there's a lot of that conflicting emotions, and and that's something that it's really hard to go through and really hard to explain because we're taught emotions are black and white. You either love somebody or you hate them. You either this or you that. And, you know, but that's not really how life works. We can be, you know, torn between how the love we have for somebody and an act that they committed and not know how to reconcile that, not know how to fit that together. And all we can do is try to move forward in the best way possible. But eh, that's going to look different for each person. And
Absolutely.
there isn't any way to explain that, especially if people are unwilling to even try to understand.
Yeah.
But no one else will ever be able to understand because their choices might be different. And there's so many things in life, and this kind of came up in the book too, where she thought she would feel this way or thought she would be this way about something, and then she's in that situation and realizes that she doesn't actually know what she feels
Yeah. Yeah,
because
that's true to life.
the
That happened to
thing
me
that she
yesterday.
thought she would do and that she's adamant she would do is
Yeah.
suddenly not what is something she can't do, even though she feels like that would be the right thing. You know, I should feel this way about it, but I can't get myself there. And so
Right.
it's really interesting to deal with that turmoil and that aspect and see a lot of that coming up and boiling to the surface and
Yeah.
you know giving understanding to real life situations that happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely interested in the Rise to Feminism book and kind of seeing how all of this started. Um, but yeah, I got off topic there. I don't remember any of the spicy scenes. Like I'm thinking back, I'm like, was it actually spicy? Like I don't,
No, Teleosis is very closed door, very fade to black type of
um,
spice. So you didn't miss them. I got a little more explicit the more books I wrote. So
well, and that makes sense too. You kind of open up, you get more comfortable doing something and you open into that. So what does your writing process look like? Like, how do you work in your writing into your daily life and around your other obligations?
yeah, yeah, because there are a few other obligations. I'm a partner, I'm a mom, I'm a coach. Like I have a whole business thing that I do. So my best time to write is in the morning. I do sometimes write in the afternoon, like a couple of days ago, I had a real small window. But when I get into it, I want to stay into it. I don't want to write just for 30 minutes and then have to walk away. Sometimes it takes me a little bit to get going, but once I get going, generally, generally I want to stay with it. So I tend to write write early in the morning, before the rest of the day hits. And sometimes that's really, really early. Sometimes it's, 8 to 10, what have you. And then honestly, there are days when I just have to fit it in. Do I write every day? No, like I'm not writing today because I have a lot of editing that I have to do for some clients, but I know where I'm going. It is always living in my brain space, like always. They're always whispering, they're always talking, and things are always cooking in the background. Um, and so for me, it really this next series that I'm writing has been an elevation of my writing craft. So I think I'm a very good intuitive writer. Like you read Teleosis, so like things flow, things move. Of course I had editors and people help me with it, but for me this is a different kind of story. And so with Teleosis, what I was processing it real time and writing it. What
Hmm.
I'm doing in this next series, which is a retelling of biblical characters, female biblical characters, starting with Queen Jezebel, is I've actually had to grow my emotional internal life in order to be able to write these characters. So, whereas before it's been processing what I'm going through, now I'm creating, I'm creating out of my own growth. So it's been really interesting. I spent 9 months working on a first draft that will not see the light of day. I had to start over for the second draft from scratch because it wasn't the story that needed to be told. So
Yeah.
there, I'm a what I would call a in the writing world a pantser plotter. So I definitely plot. I definitely have to know kind of a map of where we're going, even though it lives in my head for a long time. I have to eventually write it out. But then once we get there to that chapter, it just whatever. Like the characters are going to do what the characters are going to do. So I generally have an idea of the scene, the main scene for every chapter.
Hmm.
Kind of like the Netflix series. Every episode has a plot and storyline. Um, but how that expresses itself when I sit down at the keyboard is anybody's guess. We'll see. I'll find out when I get there.
You go in with the idea, and then once you're sitting down and you realize it may need to change, and what you thought
Yeah,
you were going to do isn't what. And that seems to be pretty typical. I hear that a lot when I ask that question. Like,
yeah,
um, some authors have just given up on the idea that they even need to outline. Other ones outline everything to a T, and then
yeah,
they sit down and write and realize they have to backtrack because their characters have decided to do different things. And
yeah,
uh, but one thing that they all seem to agree on is their characters take on a life of their own every
absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you also see shades of other people in your life in these characters.
Mhm.
Like it's not, like, for instance, in Teleosis, I didn't write I didn't cut and paste people from my life into that book, but there are shades of them, shades of my relationships with them. Again, it's a book is a living, breathing thing. And
Mhm.
so, these characters want their story told. They don't want you to tell the story like you think it needs to be told. And so, this is the surrender to the great creative flow, especially that we have enormous access to as women. I mean, we birth life, we create. That's what we do in our bodies and into the world. And so sometimes you gotta go, literally gotta go with the flow. And how the book ends up is, that's the adventure for the author. That's why we write, is because we're going to learn as much about ourselves and about the characters um, as we go along the journey. And then we get to really kind of like a child going off to kindergarten, I always say, or even a kid going off to college. Like then the book is going to live its own life, and you're experiencing the book differently than how I wrote it. And so it's just fascinating. Stories change our brain chemistry. And so it's probably one of the most powerful tools we have as humans to change what's happening in and around us.
And everyone who reads the book is going to experience differently and see it differently because our
Absolutely.
experiences are different. And so you can't ever know exactly how someone's going to take something or how they're going to interact with it. You can intend it to be informative of this, but depending on the experiences of the person reading it, that's going to come across different. Because
Absolutely.
we both grew up in religious backgrounds, but I still saw it differently than you did. But
Yeah.
my experience was different than yours
Yeah. Yeah.
within that religious background. And so it's very interesting how these worlds that authors create take on so many different lives.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I have it up on my wall. I'm looking at it right now. It's 3 questions. What do I want the reader to feel? What sensory details will trigger that emotion? And then what makes this personally relevant? And there are one, two, three, four, five things. There's more, but there's a few different universal experiences that you want someone to feel, and you did. Even though I was writing about a religion you had never heard of or experienced, you still connected. There were parts of you and parts of your brain and parts of your heart that understood what Anira was going through as a woman, as you know, like in all the things. And so, really good storytelling is about connecting to that personally relevant experience, whether it's personally relevant for me, but especially it's got to be personally relevant for the reader. And when books don't do well, that's probably the thing that's missing. There's not enough connection points for the heart, for the imagination to engage.
Yeah, I could definitely see that because if we don't connect, it's, we have no interest in telling
Yeah.
other people about it. We have no interest in
Yep.
talking about it and discussing it. And um, it's really, it's okay that it could be entertaining, but
Right.
you're not going to watch it again. It's not going to get
Right. Those
no.
aren't the kind of books I write. I want to
Yeah.
change how you think about yourself and the world through my writing. And so I'm not writing just for entertainment, although I'm well aware it's got to be fun to read.
Yeah, and you can see that there's a lot of depth in your characters, a lot of emotional things that are happening and so um it'll be interesting when I have a chance to read some of the other things you've done to see how the progression is
Yeah.
in your writing, having read your first book to then
Yeah.
get to read
Oh,
some.
you'll see it. I've already had people tell me. I have one lady who has been on both my ARC teams, and she's like, "I just, the difference between your skill and craft as a writer between Teleosis and other books is just, you just get better." So
Do you think you'll ever go back and try to refine Teleosis, or do you think you'll leave it as is?
I don't think so. I don't know though. I mean, never say never, but I know that there's a sequel to it.
Mhm.
Emiri and Lucas deserve their own story. But I'm not there yet. So I don't know. I don't know. I even have the title for it. It's Telos. So instead of teleosis, it's telos, which is Telos, which means completion. So teleosis means the journey of transformation in Greek, and telos means completion. And so it will probably end up at some point a duology because I definitely want to give Lucas and Amiri their day in the sun because that was actually that was such a wonderful relationship to write, and it tipped off my next book. Like that was like, okay, now I actually have to write a romance. I loved writing Lucas and Amiri, and let me write a romance. But it's unformed, so I haven't started writing that one yet. I got to get through at least this next series, if not another.
And it sounds like you have quite a bit of projects going on because you're working with clients and you're working on your own projects and you have a cover release coming out next
Yep,
month.
yep,
And so there's a lot going on in your world right now.
yes. It's funny because people are like, "How do you manage it all?" And I'm like, "Who says I do? I don't know. I just, one day at a
That's how I
time."
feel. I'm like, I don't know how that I'm exactly managing anything right now. I'm just
Yeah,
making it work.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
and I'm not sure those are the same things.
right, right,
So, it might look a little managed, but it's definitely more chaos than
right.
control.
Yeah, I'm glad you see it as managed. I'm glad that you see that because sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Like, yeah, it's life is interesting because um somehow we always manage to get through the chaos, but
Yeah.
right now I'm getting through a lot of chaos and I was actually talking to my grandma about this morning. I was like, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, how am I going to get myself to get out of bed today?
Mhm.
There's too much that I have to do, and it all feels overwhelming. So, what's the one thing that's going to get me out of this bed?
Yep.
like that I
Yep.
could do. And for me, that was this interview. I was like, well, I want to do the interview. I want to talk to her. I want to ask some questions about the book. I want to learn more about the inspiration behind it. And so like this interview is literally what got me out of bed today.
Woo! Thank you. That is an honor, and I'm humbled with that. Yes.
You
Yes.
know, it gets there's things in life that just become and changes and transitions that we go through that um they become extremely overwhelming, and there's a lot of things that we have to deal with, and it doesn't none of them may seem too much on their own, but when they start stacking up, or when one thing hits hard enough that it takes you out for a couple of days and then other things build up,
Yeah.
and you start having to kind of go through this, and you see Anira go through that, where it was like one thing happened and it was big enough that it kind of shut her down for a little while, and then everything else piled up. But it doesn't mean that she shouldn't have shut down, or because pushing through that pain and stuff can end up causing the same problem or just delaying the shutdown. And then you shut down even longer than you normally would have, which to me is what felt more like what happened to Anira. She kept
Yeah.
trying to just go and push through and ended up
100%.
completely breaking
Yeah.
instead of allowing herself to have processed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it's just, and sometimes it's those little things that we have to do. Like, okay, I have stuff I have to get done. None of what I have to do today is fun.
Right.
Well, maybe that, and then going back through it and going, okay, well, maybe that's not true.
Yeah.
One of my managers has actually been helping me more than she realizes. I think she's trying to be helpful, but I think she's also kind of like, Rebecca, get over yourself. Um, because I've been struggling. I have a lot of stuff going on in my life. I'm feeling very overwhelmed. There's a lot of things that kind of keep falling through the cracks and falling apart. And while a lot of good things are happening, it's really hard to focus on those good things and reframe things when so much of the rest of it is just falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
And because you feel like a sieve and you're trying to catch all the water, but it's all just coming out anyway.
Yeah.
It's overflowing the top, it's coming out from the bottom, and so it's hard to see what is staying and what's still there. And so that becomes, and she'll tell me, she's like, I told her the other day, I was like, it is really weirdly triggering when people are, hey, how are you today? Hey, how are you today? And she's like, Rebecca, you have so much going on in your life right now that there hasn't really been a lot of good days. So of
Mhm.
course it's triggering when you have to hear that 100 times a day because you're a cashier,
Right.
and just the acknowledgement of like you're going through things. There's a lot going on in your life was just like, oh my God, other people see, are able to see that. And
Yeah.
and then it was and then after that, she's like, but I do think you need to reframe how you see some things. And I was
Yes.
like, that is, and I just looked at her and I was like, that's true. I do.
Yeah. Right.
And so her saying that to me was kind of where it was like, I wake up and I start going through the list of all the things that I have to do that day, all the doctor's appointments, all
Mm.
the calls, the insurance that I have to make. None of those things are fun. And now
Right.
I am doing it for me, and I'm doing it for my dogs, and I'm doing it for my grandmother, and I'm doing it for, and it's just like there's this myriad of things, and it's overwhelming, and it's tough, and it's hard, and it's just like, oh my God, I have to do this, 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 this. So what's the one thing I'm looking for that I have to do today? Like, what's the one thing?
Yeah.
And and I started doing that when she told me you need to start reframing some of the things and so I started trying to find, okay, here's the list of all the crap I don't want to do, but what's the one thing I do want to do?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to use that to help me get to that reframing point. And so
Yeah.
it's just
Brilliant.
interesting because um life takes turns that you never expect.
Hmm.
And you think things are going to go one way and then a bunch of stuff happens and there's a and you have everything planned out, but it doesn't always go the way you expected it to, or things end up being harder than you thought. And it doesn't mean that you made wrong choices.
Right.
It just means that life is lifing.
Yep.
It's doing
Yeah.
what it does. And we live in a world full of other people and other demands and other things. And so we can plan all we want, but we can't account for what other people's experiences, other people's needs, other people's uh, wants
Yeah.
are going to do to change the choices we've made.
Yeah.
And so it's just working around it and getting through it. And um, you really see that through your book in Teleosis with Anira and the changing aspects, the constant changing aspects.
Yeah. Sounds like it found you at the right time.
It kind of did.
And
A
it's funny
lot of
because,
things do
yeah,
that in the
yeah,
world if you're paying attention.
yeah. And it's funny because the intention I go into every event is that these stories, these characters, whether it's Anira, whether it's Carrie, whether it's Adia, whether it's soon to be Callie and Araya in my book Bejeweled that comes out in September, I want them to find their readers.
Hmm.
Like the need for these stories is there. That's why I've been given the story in the first place. But my prayer is, and my intention is that these ladies find who they need to find
Yeah.
and find the women who need to hear their story when they need to hear it.
I think that that's absolutely beautiful and wonderful and a wonderful way to approach your craft. Um, it's a little bit how I feel about why I do the interviews is I want people to find you guys. I want to find you guys.
Yeah.
Don't get- and I will admit this wholeheartedly, and I've done it before and I will in the future. These interviews are entirely started off selfishly, because, well, maybe not entirely selfishly. I wanted a way to help indie authors, aside from just because I can't always afford to buy the books from you and then put them on my table. Um,
Right.
and nor can all of you afford to give me enough of a discount so that I can do that.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so and I don't want to put anybody, like, I would never expect an author to take a loss on a book so that I could get it on my table just so it could get out there.
It's
So,
it sounds like you were trying to meet a need, and that need
yeah,
was something you needed too. So I think
yeah.
I don't think
Um,
that's
but
selfish. I think
I
that's
enjoy
beautiful.
doing these and I enjoy the opportunity to talk to you guys. And part of the reason I keep it going through all the chaos happening in my life right now is because I just have fun.
Yeah.
I don't come in with an outline. I get in here and I have a conversation with you guys. And I hope that it inspires somebody else to put their stories out there. Or I hope that it inspires somebody to try one of your books. And it's not like I have this massive audience or anything, but maybe one day I will, and maybe one day I won't. But if nothing else, we get to have really great conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you read my book, so I'm eternally grateful.
I read your book twice. So almost every not to take away from that, but almost every time I do these interviews I read the book twice because I
Mm,
read it once to experience it and then
yeah.
I go back and I read it again to try to pull out points, take a few notes, because usually by the time I do these interviews I'm already halfway through another author's book.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
I want to experience the book where I just read it. And then I go back through, I read it again, I take down some notes and things about it that I can go back and reference, and so that I don't accidentally bring up somebody else's book into, I'm sure
Right.
at some point that's
Yeah,
going to happen. I
it's a
wouldn't put
little
it,
awkward.
um,
A little awkward.
we're, I wanted to talk about, because you do coaching as well for
Hmm.
writing and things like that. So um we can be we've already gone over our, I do that every time. Um but let's talk about your coaching a little bit before we end our conversation here, because I feel like we're going to get too carried away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to because this is the other piece of the puzzle for me.
Mhm.
So being an author, yes, helps the women that read my books, but I'm always wanting to go further than that. And so I want to help women write their own books that make an impact. And so I typically do that. And my ideal, it's not my ideal client is not somebody that necessarily just wants to write a book. What I found is someone like me who is a recovering perfectionist who has a fantastic idea but also needs the validation, but wants to make an impact, yes, on their readers' lives, but also on their own. And that means that you got to build a business around it. And so most authors wait till their book comes out to build the business, because books are business, and book sales are not going to get you what you want unless you already have a social media platform of 1 million people that can buy the books. Most of us don't. Um, so for me, it's a woman who already thinks of herself as an author. She just hasn't begun that journey yet. But in terms of an author who wants to be, whether it starts out as part-time, as a side hustle, it's something that you want to offer a service to the world, that ties in with the theme of your books. That's really the woman that gets the most out of my coaching. So it also includes writing. It absolutely includes the technique of writing, the editing, all of that, but also the strategy. Like, how do you make this into something for yourself? I talked with a woman who's already a published author, and she wants to open a service-based business for financial planning for indie authors and creatives. Like,
Oh,
she just, yeah. So I'm gonna help her. It's just one of those things where it's like there's so many possibilities. I want to help women who have an entrepreneurial spirit that want to make an impact and they want to do it through their gifts. That's the short answer. The if you want to learn more, go to my website, and I've got all sorts of detail on there.
and then the book cover reveal that you have
Mhm.
coming out next month, what book is that for?
Yeah, so that's the first in my new series. The series itself is called Becoming, but the book that's coming out, the cover that I'm going to be revealing, and it's so gorgeous. Oh my God, it's so gorgeous. I love it. This is what I love about being an indie author is that I have so much input into the entire creative process, and I love this cover. Um, it uh, it is a story called Bejeweled, and it is a biblical retelling of Queen Jezebel, but it's not a biography. It's not a tit for tat about her life. It is the story of women in that time period of Queen Jezebel and how Queen Jezebel's life influences their life. So the tagline for the Becoming series is it's not your grandma's Bible stories. And
Oh,
so they're gonna be spicy, they're gonna make you think, they're gonna be political, they're gonna be, there's gonna be religious aspects to it. And then that will lead into 4 other novellas. I'm writing novellas for the rest of the series that are retelling the story of Esther, Ruth, um, Michal, the first wife of King David, and Athaliah, who is Queen Jezebel's daughter.
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna get through Jezebel, and then we'll see who's in line next. Ruth and Esther are kind of competing. I'm not sure yet. So we'll see.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm really interested in in reading that when it comes out.
Yeah. September 22nd. The release date is breathing down my neck.
Just in time for my birthday.
Yes, of course. That's why I did
My
it.
birthday's on the 24th. So
Amazing. Amazing.
that. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I've had so much fun talking to you. I really wish I could talk to you longer, but I have a crazy day of appointments today.
Life. Life.
And
Yeah.
um and we have already gone over that time. I, I I'm sure it probably came through, but I missed a call. Um, and I still kept going because I was having too much fun with this conversation. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to the insurance company that called me back finally.
I'm definitely more interesting than an insurance company, I will say that. So,
Without, it's not even a competition. I, there is no doubt that that is true. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining me. I'm really excited to see what you have coming in the future.
thank you.
And really excited to see the other books that you've had come out. Everybody check out her website. Again, all of that, it will be on the screen as soon as I'm done editing. Um, and then follow her on Instagram and keep updated with what she's got coming out through her website. Are your books available for purchase through your website or is it through?
Yeah, my signed copies are sprayed edges, hard covers of Teleosis are, and they're beautiful. Soon I will have also the release sprayed edges. Those are beginning coming next week, but I'm available for ebook and print everywhere else. So anywhere you buy books, however you buy books, my books are out there.
Perfect. So I always recommend if available, buy from the author
Yeah.
directly. That works best for everybody. They um royalties through Amazon, not so much. Uh,
No, not so much.
but if that's the way you need to get your books, then still get the book. Don't
Exactly. Exactly.
there is no judgment, but if you
No.
can buy
Yeah.
directly
But
when
I will say, I tend to price my books, even the signed copies, lower than you're going to find out in the world. So
yeah,
I don't tend to, I price them that way on purpose.
yeah.
So
Well, that's good. So thank you again, Amy. I have enjoyed it. I look forward to everything you have coming down the pipeline. I look forward to being able to do this again at some point in the
yeah,
future.
yeah.
And I I am really good at and really bad at ending these. Can't even,
Well, you can always say, we'll see. I'll see you soon. I'll see you
yeah.
again soon.
So we'll see you soon, and everybody don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, comment, all of the things to help show your support for the Indie Author podcast, as well as the indie authors in the podcast, and Books, Brews, and Dogs, where you can buy a book and help save a dog or a cat. All book purchases help donate back to nonprofit animal rescues. And that is my plug that I normally forget.
You got it. Good job.
All right. Bye, Amy. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.